Hello and welcome, YouTube friends. It's nice to be with you today. I'm going to have a bit of fun today making a stencil t-shirt for my very special grandson. And I would like him to be able to do it himself. So I thought, well, let me do one for him and show you how I do it. And then he will be able to watch this video along with you and learn how to do it for himself. So when I post him the supplies, he's got everything ready. So I have a plain cotton t-shirt here with me, and I have put inside, between the front and the back, just a piece of card. It could be a bit of packaging of some sort, but you want to try and make sure that you don't have any folds in it, because that might pick up on your stencil. Then I have moved and rolled out of the way most of the t-shirt, so it's out of harm's way. I've tried to straighten it as much as I can. And generally speaking, if you're doing a design on the front of a t-shirt, just working so that you're just underneath the armpit is a good idea, especially for ladies. We don't necessarily want the design straight across our boobs because it doesn't always look good depending on what the design is. So I've chosen for my darling grandson this lovely lizard, and we have a special memories of lizards and things from our garden when we were in South Africa. And I'm going to be using a stencil brush, and you'll see that this has a very nice flat edge to it, so you can do a stippling action, which means that I'm dabbing it at 90 degrees. And then I have already mixed up some olive green fabric paint with a little bit of lemon yellow. And if your paint is not 100% mixed together, it doesn't matter, because you're going to find that it's rather nice not to have everything just one solid color. It's more natural. So my first thing that I've done is I've actually put everything onto a plastic lid here, so that if anything spills, it's not going onto my design. And I'm picking up some of my paint, and you'll see that there's quite a lot on the brush at this stage. So what I'm going to do is just wiggle it around a little bit in circular motions to try and get that more evenly spread. And then the idea with the stenciling is that you don't brush side to side, you dab it at 90 degrees. So you can see I'm just dabbing very carefully at 90 degrees. If I brush backwards and forwards, then there's a tendency for the paint to go underneath the stencil, and then you get what is known as bleeding. So we want to avoid that if we can. You can do this really lightly, and you'll be able to do this in several layers if you wanted to. So you could put one color down, and then if you wanted to go back in with the second color, you could easily do that. So if you're wanting to shade something, that would be a way to go. So I've mixed lemon yellow and my olive green together. I could go back in with a little bit more of the olive to make any of the areas that I'm working with a bit darker. So once I've got my paint on and it's started to settle into my fabric, I'm just going to gently then use a circular motion, but I'm working ever so lightly on the surface. I'm not rubbing against it, I'm just kind of, how would I describe it? Gently tickling a cat, lightly massaging it into the fabric so that I get a nice crisp outline. And then I'm just using my fingers at this stage to support the stencil so it doesn't shift around. But if it was a very large design that you're doing, you could quite easily use some masking tape, and that would actually be probably more secure for you. But because mine is a big area and it's only in one sort of part of the t-shirt, I'm not worrying too much about that. So I'm going back and just gently moving in circular motions, but you can see my application of paint is really very dry indeed. It's actually always a good rule of thumb to work with rather a dry brush and go back a second time and put a bit more paint on than to have so much paint that you have the bleeding. Okay, but remember we're working at 90 degrees to begin with, and once the paint has started to seep into the fabric, then you can go back gently and just move in a circular manner so that you actually just get the paint to settle nice and evenly. Okay, you often find that there's a bit of residue of paint on the plastic of the stencil, and if you're needing a bit more paint just for a small area like these little fingers, you can pick up from there rather than having to dip your brush into a whole lot more new paint. Now, one of the things with fabric paints is that they are transparent colors normally, because normally you would be working on a light background such as a white or a cream. You do get opaque fabric paints, but the colors aren't as nice and you don't have as many colors, and it's not the most common way to use fabric paints. So generally speaking, your fabric paints will be transparent. They will be water resistant, so you'll be able to wash them if you heat set them afterwards. And that means that once you've actually allowed your design to dry, you must then either take a hot dry iron, not a steam iron, a dry iron, and then just iron for 2 to 3 minutes on the reverse side of your design. And that's like ironing over a fruit stain on your t-shirt. You know, once you've ironed it, it's really hard to get it out. Well, it's the same principle here. Alternatively, if you're 100% certain that your whole design's dry, you could pop it into the tumble dryer and then actually just let the heat from that dry it. But you do want to dry it and use the heat on it first before you do any washing. It's not like dyeing where you're rinsing things off first. So remember, let your fabric paints dry, and when they're dry you need to heat set them, either using a dry iron or you could use your tumble dryer. Right, so I'm building up quite a nice color here, and you can see that I'm not using, out of all the paint I started with, I'm not using an awful lot of it. So stenciling is a really economical thing to do, and you'll also notice that it is actually going quite quickly. So if you are making stencils and things for maybe a team building thing, or you're entering a cycle race or a running race and you all need t-shirts, this is a really nice way to actually get yourself team colors without having to spend too much money. And it is fun, you can personalize your logos. Right, so just working this last little section of the tail now. We don't add water to our fabric paints simply because water will actually just dilute them, and that makes the paints runny, and when they get runny they tend to spread everywhere. So if your paints seem a little bit thick, here's the trick. You just take a little bit of fine table salt, and I mean a little bit, I mean a few grains, and you just mix that into your fabric paints, and it just softens the mixture so that it's more spreadable. But you don't really want to go and put a whole sort of teaspoon or so in, because that's going to be way too much. Right, so I'm quite happy with my design as it is at the moment. If you're wanting to have a look and see what your things look like, you could use this as a little window and you could take it back. But I think I might just add a little bit of dark. So I have on the lid here, which I will clean afterwards, some of my olive. And I'm just going to take a little bit of this on the brush and just work a little bit in towards the center of the spine, just to create a little bit of depth here. And I'm really not doing too much of this. Once I've got that on, I'm just going to gently use my circular motion to blend that color in. And it's going to be terribly subtle, that there will be extra color, but it does mean that it's just not this solid mass of one color here. And in nature most things have variations of color, so it's really easy. Now give me a second just to move all these wet paint things out the way. Normally I would suggest to you that what you do is just to leave your stencil on until your paints are dry, but I know that you're wanting to see what's happened, so let me lift this up carefully. I'm pulling it up from both sides and moving it away, and there you have it, a really nice crisp design. I've just got one little section here where I had too much paint, which causes that bleeding, but because this is a hand printed design, I'm not too worried about that. And if you look how nicely the slightly darker shading has worked just as a little bit of a contrast around the spine area of the lizard. Yeah, I'm very pleased with that, and I think my darling grandson is going to be too, because he's just a real nature lover. So for you, my boy, this is your stencil t-shirt coming to you soon. Anyway, if you have any questions or anything like that, you'd like some help, just drop me a note in the comments section below. I'm really happy to share my knowledge with you, or to try and help you if you've come across a problem. And if you've enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up, and please consider subscribing to my channel. Lots of different crafts I do here, and I'd love you to be part of my community. Bye for now.